the most quantity. So it's really the difference between quality and quantity. As you know, what's happening in organizations today, it has been happening probably since Taylor, 100 years ago, and that is that the drive has been towards maximizing, getting the most possible product out of the resources that we use, and that hasn't worked. It hasn't worked from a people standpoint, and it hasn't worked from a product standpoint, because what you wind up getting in products, of course, are products that you have many products, but they don't get the job. The quality is not there, and that's certainly the case. I redid my kitchen about 6 years ago, and at the time that I redid my kitchen, I got all new appliances. The washing machine and dryer lasted 3 years. The dishwasher lasted 2.5 years. The refrigerator was a real trooper and lasted for 3.5 years. So within 3.5 years, I had replaced every appliance in my kitchen. So this is what efficiency looks like. Effectiveness is like the refrigerators that we had when we were kids, and they were refrigerators that our parents had before we were born. And when we left the house, the refrigerator was still there. So that's a difference in terms of the product. So what is it in the thinking that makes that difference? That makes us go in one direction as opposed to another. Einstein said that everything in the world is a product of the way that we think about it. We cannot make any changes without first changing the way we think. So in order to do that, we're going to look at I'm just down. All right. So we're going to look at how to create a learning organization. A learning organization, even though Deming never used the term learning organization, everything that he was pointing to was a learning organization. And so, what is a learning organization? How do we create a learning organization? There are two kinds of learning. One is adaptive learning, and one is generative learning. Adaptive learning is the kind of learning that we do in order to survive. It's based in fear and blame. In an organization, it's based in blame, in nature and in organizations and in relationships. So everything that I'm going to talk about now, while I'm going to couch it in the language of organizations, is what works in even tiny organizations, like a marriage, like parents and kids, like partnerships. So it's not different. So adaptive learning is based in fear, and for human relationships that looks like blame. Blame is always based in fear. The purpose is survival, so we're really good at that. That's what allowed us to survive as we were becoming full-blown Homo sapiens. We learned that certain things could hurt us, etc. The ones who didn't learn it, we're not descended from them. We're descended from the ones that learned it. So that stuff, that survival, that fear-based survival is ingrained in our DNA. The purpose of adaptive learning is survival, pure and simple. Generative learning is a whole other kind of learning. That's that wonderful, wonderful kind of learning that children do when they experiment, they play, they discover things. You do it all the time. It's enlivening. It feels good. It's based in curiosity and openness. In organizations, it's based in accountability. Accountability, really, what does that mean? We'll talk about that in just a moment. The purpose of generative learning is not survival. It's growth and self-expression. There is no growth except adaptive growth, and no self-expression in adaptive learning. And then, of course, finally, it's creative. It's where all creativity comes from. Years and years ago, before Silicon Valley was the Silicon Valley that we know, when they were just starting out, we had a client, and they had a problem. Their problem was that they were paying their people top wages, and yet they were unable to keep president and huge turnover. And but most importantly, they hadn't put out a market-breaking product in a couple of years. They had a one-hit wonder, and so they wanted to know why that was happening. So we went in there, and of course we spoke to people. And one of the first people we spoke to was a director, and he said, "I'll talk to you, but you can't use my name, and I'll deny it." And we looked at each other and went, we don't have to interview anybody anymore. We know exactly what the problem is. The problem is fear. And no, there is no creativity where there is fear. So that was their problem. You see, they had created a culture where if you made a mistake, we'll talk about that in just a moment, where you made a mistake, you were punished for it. It's all about mistakes, especially when you're pioneering technology. It's all about mistakes. You don't make mistakes, you don't. And so consequently, everybody colored within the lines, and they didn't go anywhere. All right, so this is what traditional problem solving looks like. Something happens, anything, it's a problem. We have a problem. And what's that met with? It's met with fear. Oh no, it wasn't me. With that comes blame and fault. Who did this? Who's responsible for it? All right, and you know what happens when someone does that? Who did that? Remember the strawberries in the cane mutiny? Yes, the strawberries in the cane mutiny. Who was about to admit where the strawberries went? Because that was frightening, and that leads, of course, to defensiveness, which then leads to denial. I didn't do it. Which leads to distorted information. Now you're trying to gather information about what this problem is, how it got started, what are the underpinnings of this problem, but people aren't being honest. They're not talking to you because they're afraid of the consequences. So consequently, you get distorted information. What happens with distorted information? There's no learning, for one thing, and you have ineffective action. And that ineffective action then leads to the problem. You can see how it's a vicious cycle that gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until you've worked in situations like that. What I call non-positional problem solving, or the problem solving for a learning organization, looks very different. First of all, it's fueled by accountability and trust. Something happens, a problem happens. That problem is met with openness and curiosity. So it's now no longer who did this and whose fault is it, but the question is, wow, we have this problem. Let's see what the problem is. Let's see what caused it. Let's see what the elements are. So it's met with curiosity and openness. And with that, you see, when there's no blame, when people aren't afraid, they'll tell you the truth. So you get quality information out of it, and open communication, collaboration. Open communication and collaboration lead to effective action, which leads to organizational learning. Wow, we learned something here. We learned that we can't do it this way. We learned that this strategy doesn't work. You see, that's real learning. And then, of course, that creates the space for more openness and more curiosity the next time that there's a problem, so you don't get dug into that cycle of defensiveness. No communication can take place in the space of blame. I threw this in there because we talk a lot about organizations, but bottom line is the thing that matters to us most is our relationships in our life. So this is what an argument. Think of the last time you had an argument with someone you love. You know, it could have been 7 minutes ago, it could have been a day ago, but I guarantee you it was not that long ago. And so we have two people who are involved in this. And I'll tell you, the closest person to you is probably the person that you're most dug in terms of cycles of defensiveness. So something happens in the relationship. It doesn't matter what it is, because it's, first of all, it's not the first time it's happened. Maybe the topic is new, but the cycle of defensiveness is very old, and just every new topic that pops up for you to argue about just brings back up the cycle of defensiveness. So it's just the cycle of defensiveness. It doesn't matter what you're arguing about. Keys to the car, the toilet seat left up. It doesn't matter what it is. It's all the same thing. And so, something happened, one person grumbles or says something, the other person reacts defensively. Because this is a muscle. This is a muscle that you have. And then the second person responds defensively, and it goes round and round. You see what happens. Looking at it more closely, again, it's fueled by fear and blame. The same old issue, new version, as we said. It gets dumped into an organizing pattern. That's from another talk, but really, the schemas in your mind that make meaning out of everything that happens and changes things so that they fit in with what you want. So if something happens, it gets dumped into your brain and you go, oh, I know exactly what it is. You listen just long enough. Okay, this is not real listening. You listen just long enough to hear that word, to hear that phrase that tells you, oh, I know exactly what's going on. I know exactly. And at that point, you start formulating your rebuttal. No more listening goes on. So you listen to refute, to defend, and to be right. You become defensive and you blame. And the interesting thing is that the two go hand in glove. You become defensive, you blame. You blame, you become defensive. And with becoming defensive, of course, you become the victim. So think about that argument. Think about how you were being done to by that other person. You were being done to. You were being victimized. Okay, so another thing that we do is that we deny our responsibility rather than saying, I can see that I should have brought this up earlier, or I can see that there's a payoff for me in being involved in this conflict. We don't take responsibility. So consequently, there's no new understanding, and your organizing pattern is reinforced. In other words, your way of thinking is reinforced. And of course, now you become more entrenched, and it goes wrong. I'm going to just skim over this because I could never do as good a job as Steve, I'm sure did. So I'm just going to give you some highlights about systems, about what systems are. I know that you people, of all people, know what it is. Do I need to talk about this? I don't think I do. You know the difference between linear and nonlinear, right? True. If you don't, I'll go over it. Okay. So in a linear system, the outputs are proportional to the inputs. You step on the gas, the car speeds up. You step on the gas more, the car speeds up more. And if you knew, if you had the ratios and you knew all the little things that were going on between the pedal and whatever is going on, then you could calculate exactly what speed you would be going. So it's really based on proportion. Nonlinear systems are much trickier, and unfortunately, we have a tendency to treat nonlinear systems as if they were linear systems. A nonlinear system means that small changes can have huge inputs, and Steve, you were talking about this, the leverage points, where you can do a small action and get a large result for that action. Politics is like this. If you could just get this one guy to go along with you, he's going to drag along. So rather than Mark going to speak to 100,000 people, I'm going to speak to him. And he'll have a huge effect on that. The thing about it that really can create problems for us is that small changes can have unquantifiable effects. So we don't know what can happen. It's the old story of the butterfly. The butterfly flaps its wings, yada, yada, yada. Pretty soon destroyed. The dinosaurs come back or something like that. So, huh? Oh, yeah, but so when we make changes in organizations, if we don't realize, if we don't understand that this small change that I'm making, it's a small change, the people have to, log in, and they have to stamp in or whatever they do when they get to work, that's going to have ramifications, and it's going to be just way more than the 3 seconds it takes them to do that. There's going to be emotional changes, and if you don't deal with that, that's called change management. If you don't deal with that, you're going to have huge problems. So, simple systems, complex system. A simple system is a linear system. 1 in equals 1 out, or 1 in equals 3 out, whatever it is, but it's calculable. A complex system means that the parts interact in unpredictable ways. Human systems are all complex nonlinear systems. You can never predetermine how a human system is going to work. We can get some ideas, but we can't know. And proof positive that we can't know is that the greatest minds in economics have been working on trying to create an algorithm to predict the stock market, and it has never worked, and it will never work. For the simple reason that what we call the stock market is nothing more than the result of billions and billions of erratic, illogical, unpredictable choices. Put them all together, and all of a sudden, someone comes out with a song, and your stock drops by 20%. Who could have figured that out? It can't be done. Principle of the systems thinking: systems are more than the sum of their parts, because you have that output. Even a mechanical system like a car, you have a pile of car parts, and you have a car. Yes, contextually they're the same. One is different. One is a system. One consists of relationships of the parts. And we have an emergent property, which is the ability to move, locomotion. Every action generates feedback, and this is very important in organizations, because before you institute change, before you do something in your organization, you have to ask yourself a question. What is this going to mean down the line in the future? And what is this going to mean for the larger, not only my system, but the larger system? The system in which my system is contained, the community, the industry, ultimately the world. We saw that in 2008. Wheeling and dealing in mortgages. It came down to that. Ended up literally the world economy crashing. Who predicted it? Actually, some people did. Very few people did. Time lag is another thing that we really tend to forget. We would like to have the results immediately. The results don't come immediately. That has to be calculated. when you're about to make your change, you have to ask yourself the question, what is this timeline going to be? Because if you don't, you'll either think that your intervention failed, and you'll put another intervention on top of that and overshoot your mark if you've ever been in the shower, when the water got cold and you turned it up hot, and your skin, you know what that's about. And then all actions are cyclic and nonlinear. When you live, Bill's famous red pen company, when you work in a red pen company, what just went around? I forgot what it's name. Doesn't matter. Actions are cyclic. Okay. So when you have when you treat an organization like a linear system, you look at cause and effect as linear. You say this is the cause and this is the effect. The problem is that the world doesn't operate that way. The world operates cyclically, so that there is never a cause and effect. The whole notion of cause and effect is artificial. And what I mean by that, because I just heard someone's brain explode, what I mean by that is every cause has another cause, has another cause, has another cause. Oops. I'm sorry. My flailing was the cause of the cup falling. However, there was a
animated description.
Yes, that my last language. But there was a cause that was before this, and the cause before this was multifold. One was that I put the cup here, and I had the thought there's probably not a good place for the cup, and I did it anyway. The other cause of this is that I came from a very animated family, and we speak with our hands, we speak with our faces. My father used to say, if you would just stop making faces, and I looked at him and I went, am I making a face? Thank you. So, we can then look at the cultural causes of my knocking this cup over. So, to just clean up the cup is not going to prevent it from happening again. All right, so we have to know that every action is cyclic. Yes.
Before we move off this concept of cyclic, I want to draw attention to Steve's shirt. That's all right. Talk about cycles.
Yeah. That's great. That's great.
Should go there right now. But
No. I'm not going to go there politically, but yes, but as a cycle, you see, we can start the cycle. We can start the cycle on October 7th and end the cycle today, and we see one thing. Or we can end the cycle on October 7th and look at 25 years or 50 years or whatever, you see. And then we see a whole different picture. And one of the problems going on with politics today is that each one of us is clipping this cause and effect cycle at a certain place so that it benefits our point of view. Yes?
so if things are cyclical, so you're going to spill again.
There's nothing left in the cup.
Might mean she's going to slip on the puddle on the floor.
I'm avoiding it.
Chair over
I know.
Get that order.
Oh my God, that's not that bad. Until I fall. I was hiking one day, and I was hiking with gators because I go off the trail where it's like really like flat, and all this crud gets in your shoes. So there were gators, and I had this new pair of gators from REI. So like the gators from REI, it's like they've got to be like really good. So I was walking along, and unbeknownst to me, the strap that goes underneath broke, and I took a step, and I stepped on the strap. And then I lifted my leg, and I was really moving. And I couldn't move my leg, and I went down the street. So, anyway, I don't know why I told you that.
I want to hear you take this back to Ariane.
I did.
Yeah,
I did, and they went, "Oh, well, we'll replace them." I went, "I don't want them. They broke. They almost killed me. Wait, I'm not gonna- Okay. All right. So actions are cyclic. All right. We talked about this. So creating learning organizations. Um, and so this is Deming's point one, and I've interpreted that in terms of a learning organization. The first is plan for the long-term health of the organization. That is very different from planning to have profits this quarter. And the long-term health of the organization means the long-term health of the organization, that is the people. Or, organizations don't exist. Only relationships among people exist. Organizations are not desks, they're not patents, they're not applications, organizations are only one thing, and that is people. So plan for long-term health, plan on transforming your thinking and not just implementing more protocols, just more of the same. Resist reacting in knee-jerk ways. Something happens, even something awful. And by the way, you should always have plans for when that terrible thing happens in your organization. Because when that happens, you're not going to be thinking properly. Like with Tylenol, when there was that problem with Tylenol years ago, they had a plan already in place for how to deal with something like that, and they dealt with it right. So you always need to have a plan. So no knee-jerk reactions. Take your time, and that goes for with your kids, with your people you love. Don't just blurt it out. Think about what you're going to say before you do it, and then be prepared to screw up. Be prepared to screw up. You're going to do that. And when you do screw up, always keep in mind what your goal is for that relationship, or for your organization. And your goal for your organization should be one of relationship, and then the rest will follow. Okay, and adopt a new philosophy. Of course, this is huge. This is really huge. This goes back to Einstein's. What Einstein said about first change the way you think. You have to change the way you think. You have to put things in a proper perspective, especially if you're the person in charge. Do we want effectiveness or do we want efficiency? I was working with one of the county departments, and they said, "No, we implemented this new protocol for the customer service phone room, basically what it was, and it's actually become less efficient than it was." And I said, "Well, what did you do?" "Well, we have so many calls to take that we cut down the amount of time that the customer service representatives can spend with the customer, so that they know that they have to solve that problem within 5 minutes." So this really forces them to think about what they're doing. And of course, they got just the opposite, because now, and this is where you can really see the cyclic nature of these things. What happened was, of course, I don't even need to tell you, they now hung up on people. They pretended to have solved the problem in 5 minutes. They didn't. So now that person had to call back, which literally increased the number of calls to the call center, increasing the amount of work that people had, and it literally became a vicious cycle where it got worse and worse and worse and worse. Be prepared to make major shifts in the way you see relationships and among employees. Let's talk about that. Prioritize the needs of your employees. Like I was watching years ago. I was watching on the Iditarod Arts, those races, the dog races, the sled races, and the leader, the person who was really going to win. Everybody knew that she was going to win. She had the best dogs. Pulled out of the race. She pulled out of the race because her dogs were suffering. One of her dogs was suffering from his feet. His little feet were getting chewed up, and they wear shoes, by the way. And so she was totally prioritizing her dogs before anything. So, and I'm not saying your employees are dogs. If they are, you're lucky. But that also goes for your spouse, your partner, the people you love who are closest to you. Are you prioritizing what's good for them? And that doesn't mean you've got to not take care of yourself. It just means that when you're in that situation, you need to say, what is good for what would be good for and then create a vision of what kind of relationship you want to have with your employees or with the people you love. What do you want to have? Create that vision and go for it. Because you can have it, you can make it. All right, I blended these 2 points because they were very similar, 13 and 16. Implement training, education, and self-improvement. All employees should undergo training in critical and systems thinking and problem solving. Okay. Your employees need to know what you know about systems thinking. They need to know that knee-jerk reactions don't work. They need to know what the long-term thinking has to be before they do something. They need to know how to go about figuring out what the ramifications are going to be of their actions. You need to train your employees to know that things will change. You know, that wasn't true 200 years ago. It was a little bit true 100 years ago. It was a little bit more true 50 years ago. Now, it's the basis of everything that we do. You know, I was just talking to Ian, and we were talking about computers, and I said, God, I got this really old computer. It's 5 years old. You know, how is that even possible that a computer that costs many thousands of dollars can be an old thing now? You know, but that's because change comes so fast now. Your employees have to be able to respond to it. And that means that they've got to have the training so that they don't have to depend upon you to tell them what to do. They need to be able to think through things. So, and that goes with the second one, the last one over there, build skills so that they become more adaptable. Implement leadership. Leadership, as you know, is no longer what it was up until, you know, even the 80s, even the 90s. We could still think of leadership in the old way. Really not, but most companies did. Most companies were command and control. Most companies were tailorist in their thinking. But in the last 40 years, that has changed. And it's changed drastically now. We have new generations of people joining the workforce. And I'll tell you something, they do not take orders. They don't take orders. They have their own way of doing it. They don't like it. You know what they're going to do? Now, when we started out in the workforce, you know, when you joined that company, you had the sense that you would have a job for as long as you wanted it. And of course, that all changed in the 80s. Fred Hammer. We learned as a workforce that there is no loyalty. And the new generation now really values their autonomy, their time, more than they got their job. And if they don't like what's going on, they're going to leave. So that's going to be based on the kind of leadership that you have. So you just take a second and look through that. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Let me jump right down to the bottom one. This is something that we don't often think about, and that is that leadership is based on voluntary followership. Leadership today is based on voluntary followership. Military leadership is out in business. Military leadership was based on authority. It was called legitimate power, and I hate that term because it wasn't legitimate at all. It was legitimate in certain cases. But today, followership is what makes leadership. I saw this great video of people who look like an old Logan from the 70s or something like that. And someone got up and got into the middle, it was like on this meadow, and started dancing. And this person was just dancing all by himself. And then a second person got up and danced. And the third person got up and danced. And this person who had originally just been the solitary dancer on this meadow became a leader. He was a leader because people chose to follow. So that's what we need to know about leadership today, that you can have the authority, and that's only going to get you so far with today's workforce because they're going to lead. But I'll tell you something. You say, well, what about the money? Well, first of all, assuming that they're making a living wage, which is getting harder and harder and will get harder and harder. But assume that they're making a living wage. What's going to matter to them after that is if they want to work there. And they're going to want to work there if you could be an authoritative leader, but if you have personal power, if you are a leader with personal power, if you are a leader that they want to follow, they're going to stay with you, even in light of possibly jobs that could pay more. Eliminate fear. We've spoken about that already. Create a learning organization. Create a space where your employees feel safe. Definitely not the case with that company that I told you about. The value, one of the values of having a space in which people feel safe is that they'll come to you when they see something. I'm working with a nonprofit right now, and God, the whole thing just exploded. I mean, exploded. And we got emails today from all these different people listing all these things that were wrong, but they were telling me. They weren't telling me the people who are in charge of this organizations, because this organization is not a safe place for people to be. It's not a safe place for people to speak up. And so people didn't speak up, and conditions got worse and worse and worse, and now the whole thing is exploding. So that's going to happen. Don't punish mistakes. Be happy for mistakes. The first time they happen. Maybe even the second time they happen. But realize that mistakes are the price we pay for learning. We try many, 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 many different things. Something finally works out. That's what medical trials are all about. That's what so many new inventions are all about. So if someone makes a mistake and your attitude has to be, great, let's all get together and see what the heck we can learn from this. This is great that you made that mistake. And I've had, bosses say to me, yeah, but if you do that, people are just going to be making mistakes willy-nilly all over the place. You know what? That's not going to happen, because that's not who we are. If you have an organization where people can express themselves, where it's really a case of people doing work creatively, you know what? They're not going to want to make a mistake. They're going to want to do everything that they can do to do the best possible job they can. So creating the space for them to make mistakes is going to work in your benefit, not the opposite. Make sure you're approachable, that your managers are approachable, so that what happened in this organization that I just told you about doesn't happen with you. Use open and honest communication to hear from the organization. There should always be a way of employees to communicate what their problems are, their grievances, whatever you want to call it, but there should be a way for them to do that that is safe. Break down barriers. One of the problems that Dr. Deming noticed was that that organizations are siloed. And I'll tell you something, it's worse in the medical profession. You know, your gastroenterologist knows gastroenterology, and if you've got a neurological problem that goes along with it, he or she has no clue what to do with it, so they'll send you to a neurologist who has no idea about gastroenterology, and they don't communicate. You see, so that's a huge, huge problem. And I know that that was a problem before Rockdown. I know that that was a problem many, many years ago when people were, independent groups were just working and doing their little job, really good job independently, but they weren't communicating with other departments. And so breaking down barriers is really important. Interpersonally, that looks like build a shared vision. Let everybody be going for the same thing. And by the way, don't ever make the mistake of thinking that the profitability of the company is even marginally interesting to them. They do not care if the company makes money, except to the degree that they can continue to pay them and that they will continue to have a job. So don't, rah, we're going to be so successful this year and we're going to be the top, and don't even care. They're just going to, it's actually going to have the opposite effect, which is like, yeah, dude, you're going to get rich and I'm going to still be making these paltry little few dollars here, and you're going to cut out the free parking. That's what you're opening yourself up to. So create a shared vision that you can work for. We have helped this many people. We have put this many satellites into space. We have created a vaccine that has saved this many lives. That's what matters. Recognize the difference between compromise and collaboration. This is a biggie. This is the way we usually look at handling conflict. This is the Thomas Killerman conflict grid. We have down at the bottom, avoiding. You're just not recognizing that there's a product. Up your y-axis at the top is force. You're going to handle this with force. We're seeing that all over the world today. Whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Iran, whether it's Gaza, it's everywhere. Whether it's ICE, it's everywhere. It's like we're going to handle this conflict with force. On the other hand, on the y-axis is accommodation. Accommodation means, okay, I'm going to keep the peace by giving you this. But unless you can have this piece of land, you can have this compromise, you can have this, these concessions on whatever it is. Right there in the middle is compromise. And we hold compromise in very high esteem. Well, you've got to compromise. You teach our kids, you've got to compromise. The problem with compromise is, what happens after a compromise? Like if there's a union negotiations, contract negotiations, what happens at the end when you make compromises and everybody leaves the room? Yeah, it's like everybody's just get them back the next time. Yeah, all they know is what they had to give up, not what they gained. So compromise isn't it. What is it is collaboration, all the way up there. And the only way to have collaboration is to have a shared vision. When you can say, okay, but divorces, God, in my stupider years, I consulted with people who were getting divorced, and it was and this is the model that I worked from. So I would say to them, okay, you want this, and you want this, and is there anything that you can agree upon? Is there any vision that you both share? And very often it came down to the well-being of the children, and let's keep as much money in the family as possible. Otherwise, it's all going to go to attorneys. So keeping their eye on that goal, you see, allowed them to make much, much better decisions than when it was all about what I can get for myself. All right. Okay. All right, get rid of unclear expectation. And once again, morphing this into the interpersonal sphere, we're going to look at psychological contracts. You probably have heard this term before. It was first applied to the implied or the implicit agreements that organizations had with their employees. I've expanded it to involve all of our lives. They're the greatest, by the way, greatest cause of failed relationships, the greatest cause of divorce. And I'll explain that to you in just a moment. When there's a major upset in your relationship, I hate to say most of the time, it's going to be because there's a broken psychological contract. And here's what a psychological contract is. Psychological contract is an expectation that one person has of another person, that employees have of their company. And it's different from a contract because it's not written down, it's not signed, it's not specific. There's nothing tangible. It has never been discussed absolutely such that it might have turned into a verbal contract. It's an expectation that we have of someone. So, for instance, in the 70s, up until the 70s, up until the early 80s, employees had the expectation that if they worked loyally at a job, that they would have the job forever. Then Michael Hammer came along and said, no, we've got to make the organization lean, we've got to, re-engineer this organization. And lots of faithful employees lost their jobs. That was a psychological contract that was broken. There was no actual contract. They were never told that would happen. So yeah, they had, I guess in a sense, no reason to have had that expectation, but they had it, and it changed the workforce forever. So that now, if you're looking for a new job, and you've been at the same job 10 years, the prospective employee goes, you're not very ambitious, are you? So, psychological contract is an expectation that we have of another person that has not been explicitly spoken about. So just think for a moment about your closest personal relationship. Think about the way in which they are not meeting up to your expectation. Ask yourself the question, have I told them specifically that I need to have this? I've given them the opportunity to say, yeah, I can do that. Or, I can't do that. And if you haven't done that, that is a ticking time bomb. Because if they don't meet your expectation, that will be considered a breach of psychological contract. And by the way, they're doing the same thing with you. They have expectations that you are probably oblivious about. And it would really probably be helpful for you if you would ask them, what is that not doing that you expect me to do? And then you would have the opportunity to say, yes, I can do it, or no, I can't. And if it's no, I can't, then the ball is in the court. Then you can discuss it. And this is very scary because it feels like if I talk about it, I can break it. Or if I talk about it, then I'll have to do it. Okay, so it's scary. But the alternative is that you live in this constant state of friction. So, same thing for employees the only way around the psychological contract is to find out what it is. So find out what it is that your employees expect from management, and find out from the loved ones in your life what they expect from you. Huh?
I would just type
All right. What time? Four. Okay. Well, we're done. We're out of time. Okay, then that's good. Okay, I'm just gonna go over this one slide. This is,
There's nothing after this, but yeah.
yeah, there's nothing after this until. So I just want to go over this. This is a whole other training that I do. It's called Life Unlearned, non-positional thinking. But I just want to bring this up because this is really, positional thinking is really at the core of really, literally all the issues that we have literally in the world today. So in the way we traditionally think, in the way we're kind of brought up to think, we look only at the obvious and what reinforces us. So we tend to look at positions that reinforce our position, and we tend to go off the positions that don't reinforce our position. I want to tell you a little story. It's really emblematic of how what we perceive always reinforces our position. A number of years ago, in the 50s, an anthropologist named Colin Turnbull was working with the Mbuti people in what was in the Congo. And they were mountain people, they were forest people, they lived in the forest. And they really didn't ever get out of the forest. There were clearings, but the clearings were really at most the size of a football field, generally not that much. So they had never seen beyond the forest. And one day, Colin Turnbull, announces that he's going to go down the mountain to get some supplies, and he invites one of the young men of the village to come with him. The young man says, "Yes, sir." And so they're driving, so they get out of the forest, and now they're going down the hill. And all of a sudden, the young man says, "What are those bugs? It's insects." Turnbull looks, there's no insects. What there was, on the other hand, were water buffalo grazing in the distance, about half a mile away, and they looked to be about this big. But he didn't have the organizing pattern for distance. So his brain had never perceived that things at a big distance become very small. Now, it took his brain 30 seconds to adapt once he learned that those were water buffalo grazing in the distance. But your mind will always take the sensory stimulus that enters your body and make it fit. And what doesn't fit in your pre-existing beliefs or organizing patterns, it'll shoehorn in. It'll change. It's kind of like Cinderella's sisters, It's like their foot didn't fit in the slipper, so I'll just cut off a toe here and cut off a heel there. See, I'm in there. And that's what our brains do. And so that's why this kind of thinking is so common. We assume that there is one right position, and that position is whose? Exactly. The challenge is other people's. We challenge other people's thinking, but we don't challenge our own. We don't judge other people's positions by the same criteria we judge our own positions. We don't say, no, why do I think that? What evidence is there to support my belief that so and so is this way or that whatever it is this way? What is the evidence? And is that good evidence? We don't look at our contribution to the problem. We spoke about that a little bit when we spoke about cycles of defensiveness. If you are in a cycle of defensiveness, you are contributing to it. Because if you weren't contributing to it, you wouldn't be in a cycle of defensiveness. But you are. So you are. And you have to look at what is my contribution. And it can be something very little like I should have told you. You don't have to tell them that. Yourself, but I should have told them that bothered me. I should have voiced my expectation. I should have whatever it is. It can be that small, or it can be, yeah, I did not listen to them when they spoke. I did not respect their conversation. I did not listen to them openly to learn something. I had my mind made up. Whatever it is, find out what your contribution is. It will be so liberating. I guarantee it. We tend to blame others in our conversation. You just look at the stuff that's not working in your life, in your relationships. Whose fault is it? By the way, I heard that. The person says, well, I always blame myself. Okay, blame. See, blame doesn't know where it's going, whether it's pointed this way or out there. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. So if you're blaming, you're not learning. So in positional thinking, we tend to blame others. And then, of course, we avoid really listening to other people's conversations. The great psychologist Carl Rogers said, we don't listen to other people because we're afraid that if we do, we'll be changed by what they say. So there's a whole other part after this, which is non-conditional thinking, which I'm not going to go into. I'm going to end right here. I love this phrase of Mark Twain's. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just. So, all right. So, questions, comments. If you my email address is down below. a.david@csun.edu. Any comments, questions?
Can you go back to the second from the last slide?
Sure.
The slide before Mark Twain's quote. The notion of sum zero, is that baked into Western culture or is that?
Yes. Thank you. Years ago, when I started this work, I made a decision. And that decision was that I would speak the language of Western culture. I would use Western science. I would use Western logic, which, by the way, question, how many systems of logic are there? Or let me put it another way, can something be illogical? Is anything ever illogical? Oh, but you're such cowards. Just say it. You want to say, yes, of course. Of course.
Other people thinking. It's all illogical.
It's all illogical. Okay. So when you understand how the brain works, the science of the brain, what you suddenly realize is that nothing is illogical. Everything is just differently logical. But there are as many systems of logic as there are human beings on the face of the earth, and maybe animals, and I know cats have their own logic. So I just
because it's all our own interpretation.
Exactly. Logic is nothing more than your rules for the universe and your rules for thinking. So when someone doesn't have, in our culture, we share a lot. So we have things that are logical. There are certain things that are logical to all of us. For instance, it's logical to wear clothes. Well, is it really? Is it really logical? I mean, especially with some of the weather that we have here. Why are we wearing clothes? Now, to somebody living in Northern Africa, that seems just ridiculous. Why would you wear clothes except to protect yourself maybe from the heat? But we don't wear clothes that way. We wear clothes because it's a cultural convention that we do. So we who share culture share many parts of our logic, but we also don't share many parts of our logic. And if you look at those people in your lives, the illogical things that they do, those things are not illogical to them. It's very logical to them. Very logical to them. So I don't know what were we talking about?
I was asking about the notion of zero
Yes.
sum.
Oh, the zero sum. Okay, thank you. We tend to think in zero sum, and what that means, as you know, is that we think that there's a limited amount of things, like there's a limited amount of solution. So with our employees, we think we can't give them what they want because it's going to cost more money and there's a limited amount of money. And what we don't realize is that there is an infinite number of things that we can give them that don't involve money. Satisfaction, for instance. If one person has satisfaction, that doesn't mean that another person has less satisfaction. So we have to stop thinking in terms of that life is a pie, and that if I give you what you want, if I give you a piece of pie, then there's only 7 pieces left for me because you've taken one. So that's what that means. That means start thinking in terms of the infinite variety of solutions that there are to problems. It's Peter Senge's book, and Steve, you would know this better than me, but I think he talks about, and it's a great example of problem solving as a creative act. But he was talking about some people who were, I guess, a phone company, and this was many, many years ago. And this was up north, and it was very cold, and there was a big problem with snow settling on the lines, and sometimes it would bring down the poles, and sometimes the lines would break, and it would definitely interfere with the quality of the transmission. So they were all together, and they were talking about how can we solve this problem. And then someone just playfully said, well, I was out there working on the lines, and there was a bear, and the bear climbed the pole, and it made the pole jiggle, and when the pole jiggled, it knocked the snow and ice off the wires. And so they said, oh, great, well, how are we going to get a bear? Okay, train a bear to go up the pole, what can we do? And someone said, oh, easy. We'll just put a pot of honey on top of the pole, and the bears will climb to get the honey. How are you going to get the honey on top of the poles? With a helicopter. We'll have the helicopter lower the pots of honey. Wait a moment. Why don't you just fly a helicopter along the line and have the downdraft clear the wires? So that's an example of thinking in what we would call outside the box, but allowing that playful creativity to come out. Okay, so I've now wandered all over the planet, and any other comments or questions? Yes.
The example you gave was cultural norm. It makes sense that logic in that case, what is culturally acceptable. What about predicate logic in mathematical systems?
Well, that's a very good question. And I think we're using the term logic in 2 different ways. And that's one of the problems with language, is that we have this terminology that really serves 2 different things. when we're talking about mathematics, we're talking about something that is self-referential. So it is logical by definition. So it refers back to itself. The kind of logic I'm talking to is the kind of logic that when we use the word logic, we mean the quality of the thinking, the deductive, the reasoning. So that's, can you see that those two things are?
Yeah, so I can kind of see three contexts, right? One is the abstract context where set forth a set of axioms and all of this is true within that world. It's not necessary context with this. Then there's a kind of more scientific context where you test them and never prove that the theory is true, but subjectively increase your degree of belief in the theory. And there's that kind of textual judgment.
Judges.
Kind of, and there's some very broad statements that are made by a lot of people now about this thing. Essentially, there's kind of no such thing as truth, and that kind of sense that everybody's in some domains, that's yes, it's just a matter of like kind of in abstract domain, that's really not true at all. And in the scientific domain, it seems like that's at least mostly not really true. Things aren't factually true in the sense of clarification, but it's not. Everything's not just purely subjective.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. I think that's well put. I think we're looking once again, at several different things. One is that language is so independent. And so we say, well, it's not truth, but it's the truth, or it's not the truth, but it's the truth. So what do we mean by truth? What do we mean by facts? I'm in the process of researching a book right now, cultural based, but really depends on observation and archaeological observation. And many things are taken for facts when they are really interpretations. So you recognize a phenomenon and you have to interpret that phenomenon. And how you interpret that phenomenon passes directly through the lens of what you believe to be true. So, yes, I believe that this cup is actually here, that it's actually real. And we're going to bar the conversation about this another time. But so I believe that it's here. With science, especially when it comes to the kind of science that I deal with, by the way, I went to physics. So my orientation was always through science. But when I look at science, I look at the science and I put quotes around it because it's not, once again, defined science. It's not a physical science, but it's the science of the brain. It's the science of behavior. It's the science of culture. And what I see a lot is that what one person calls a fact is really an interpretation of an observation. We have to be very careful. When my daughter was little, I used to tell her, always listen to your heart, because it's never wrong. However, your head will interpret what your heart says, and your head is often wrong. So, the fact is the fact, but how we interpret that makes a big difference. So in archaeology, and I'm going to use that because it's something that I'm researching right now, science of archaeology was practiced up until recently almost 100% by men. And not only practiced by men, but the science of archaeology and anthropology were started in what we call the Victorian era, which was a male-centered time. And so that science grew up in this male-centered time, and that was the lens through which people saw something. So about 150 years ago, grave was discovered in Berga, Sweden. And it was actually a boat. This person was buried in this boat. And this person was buried with the skeletons of 2 horses. There were weapons. There was like a board game that was really good for strategy. So clearly this person who inhabited this grave was a great warrior. And that, of course, was the belief. Then in the 50s and 60s, when we actually developed the science of, we could measure bones and we could say, probably a male bone is probably a female bone, the proportions are different. They noticed that this was probably a female skeleton. Well, of course, said, no, that's impossible. No woman can do that. Well, come science. Now we're able to tell, without a doubt, whether it was a man or a woman. Guess what? It turned out to be a woman, and still there are archaeologists and anthropologists who say no, that's not the case. So we have the evidence, how we interpret the evidence, and we see that in science all the time. 5 years ago, string theory was, this is like it. This is where man meets God. And it's like, oh, not so much anymore. It's like numbers, it's all formulas, things like that. So anyway, have I answered your question? And I have one.
No, it's got a flashback to Chalmers and the Wine.
Yeah, great book. Okay.
So it seems like it's kind of building on point. We often call that the point again. The same in the really. It's because I feel sometimes I know good. I don't want to. So what do we do with that?
You've done it. You've done it. Be aware. That's all you can do. You are aware. You are aware. Just that muscle of uncertainty that says I can't be certain about, and that doesn't mean you didn't. Absolutely. Depends on our DNA. Change it. That was the way that saw something, it sparked something, and ran. And you know what? The people who didn't have that ability didn't live to reproduce. So we are not their spawn. We're the spawn of the people who do exactly what you're talking about. We're at a point now where we start looking. See that the whole thing is to just start being aware. That's the beginning of everything. That's all you can do. You cannot do one other thing.
So this is probably a confession. That's probably the hardest thing to do.
And that's what, look around you. The world is the way it is. We don't question our thinking. We don't come to a situation of uncertainty. When she talks to me and we're having a fight, Kathy? When Kathy talks to me and we're having a fight, you see, I don't say, but if I could just, it would change everything. That's the fact. With every conflict, with every argument you have, there is something you're not getting that you can get, everything will change. You see, we have to constantly ask ourselves that question. What's he saying? What is it I'm not seeing? What am I not getting? And just getting to the habit, not gonna work initially, and you're gonna go, oh, darn, I had an opportunity and I didn't take it. And you're gonna find that the timeline comes less and less and less. And finally, you're gonna be ready to open your mouth, and you're gonna go, you know, I'm not gonna say that. But you're gonna be, you know, it's hard, it's just hard. It's hard.
All kinds of-
It's because you've taken that DNA that made us able to leave the lion who's about to eat us. You've taken that, there are no more lions now, and, you know, but now I'm using that same strategy with Kathy. You know, she is now endangering me. So, anyway, thank you.
For emotion, intuition, etc., and we're not allowed to write any logical reason, right? It's just what you're but then you can come back home to it and say, oh, look, it does make sense to do that. What does it's a different perspective. Not really about longer term.